Nantucket Shore Road. Thunderstorms. Um, 7 houses go offshore at Sconset during the no name. Water spouts raining seaward at the Nisda Cottages on Washington Street. Flooding, tidal east shore waves, tidal surges, and the Sconset Bluff. Those are some of the interesting things that I've noticed
How long you been
watching over the years.
How long you been paying attention to the weather?
Since I was probably 12 years old.
What got you started?
I'm always looking up, and people would say, "What are you looking at anyway?" I don't know, but a lot going on up there, and nobody tends to look up.
Right.
You know, there's amazing cloud formations and birds flying by, and there's more going on in the sky than I think going on the ground. At least it seems more interesting. You know.
Just for the record, could you introduce yourself and tell us where you live? And
Oh, my name's Larry Cronin, and I live on Nantucket Island, and I've lived here permanently for 40 years, but I've come to and visited Nantucket, mostly fishing, for probably another 15 years prior to 1972. So
it's an honor to meet you. And today would like to discuss lightning on Nantucket. It seems that some people believe that Nantucket has more lightning than other places. What do you think about that?
My one big experience with lightning really showed me that when lightning gets boxed in, or a big storm gets boxed in on a small place like Nantucket, it can be devastating. And I'd never seen anything like what happened about in the mid-80s. There was a storm. It came out from west to east, coming from approximately New Bedford across Martha's Vineyard into the Sound. These storms usually come with a lot of heat rising on the mainland and produce some terrific storms. They usually putter out when they get out over the water because of the cooler air. But this storm picked up energy with all the warm air rising off Nantucket, and it just hovered over the island here, and it exploded. And there was lightning going on every it seemed like 5 to 8 minutes. There was a lightning flash, and right near our house.
Where's that?
On the beginning of the Nantucket Road, near the horse stables and the pasture in the back. A bolt of lightning hit a house, and we could see it from our outside. We'll watch it very clearly because it wasn't but probably 300 yards from our window, and we watched the fire trucks arrive there. And then all of a sudden, they started to fight the fire. Then all of a sudden, they packed up and left. Well, the smoke was still pouring out and everything, and we were dumbfounded. Then we looked down further from that house, about half a mile away, and we could see flames rising on another house that had just gotten hit by lightning. And then a smaller engine, another engine pulled up as the other two big ones moved off to fight that fire.
Was that a more important person's house? What?
I don't know, whatever, but this one they had it semi under control.
I got you.
Assume, and the other truck arriving could handle it because they had knocked it down and it was just smoking. They rushed off to go to the other one, and then a third one got hit, and it was pretty dramatic. And I don't know if our area right in there is similar to out in Walwinnett. There's a lot of iron and clay, and the lightning seems to strike those areas quite frequently. I
So
mean, I have never seen anything like that before or since in that given area, but I've heard stories around the island and other thunderstorms where the lightning just hammered away. There was a couple and their dog asleep in their bed, and they had a brass headboard on their bed, and he had his hand on the brass headboard, and the lightning came in, killed him and his dog because he had his hand on his dog, but his wife wasn't touching them and she was okay.
what's that man's name? Do you know?
No, I don't remember.
Here on Nantucket?
It was here on Nantucket, out in, I don't know if it's in Wisconsin, someplace near the South Shore or something. But it was in the newspaper.
That first storm you're talking about, that was about 30 years ago?
Yeah, mid 80s.
So it was that vivid.
So
it's just
it was so vivid. But that same storm later in the day, I had gone downstairs, and there was a big rumble of thunder, and I opened the door the door, and at that very second that I opened the door, a flash of lightning hit the ground right in front of me, not 30 feet away. And it seems like the width of that band of lightning was like a foot or more wide, and there was a horse nibbling grass right there, because I had him at the stable there. I knew the horses there. They belonged to Seward Johnson. And I slammed the door the instant I saw the lightning. And I figured, oh my God, that horse is dead, or he's going to leap the fence or whatever. And I opened the door just as fast as I shut it, because I knew the lightning only lasts a fraction of a second. I opened the door, the horse was still nibbling grass, and he never moved, which was totally shocking. I mean, to this day, when somebody talks about thunderstorms, I tell that story, and it's just, it'll never leave. The vision of that was so dramatic. When anytime I hear about lightning and whatnot, two stories.
Same day as the 3 houses getting caught on fire?
I'm not sure, but
around the same time?
Yeah.
Whose horse was it? What was the horse's name?
They had 2 or 3 of these Norwegian horses. They're tan. I think there's still some of them out there at the other farm out there, and near the hidden forest. But the property belonged to Seward Johnson.
Seward Johnson?
The famous some pharmaceutical company. Seward Johnson heads that, still does, I believe. Or he's retired probably by now.
That would be Johnson.
But he sold that piece of property anyway. But that lightning strike there with the horse was totally...
Could you feel the heat? Did you feel the electricity?
Nothing. No, nothing.
You ever been hit by lightning?
No, have not.
I got hit once.
Oh my God.
It's okay.
I can't imagine. Yeah. So that's the way.
We're making a recording, honey. You can hop in.
That's the way you are. That's.
You could use some visuals if you could sit on that fence and listen.
Okay.
So he was hit by lightning, and that's the way he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll never forget that day.
That's gotta be scary.
I was in a cellar just sitting on a waterbed with my feet on a cement floor, and there was a thunderstorm going on, and I just felt the lightning hit the house, and then like the second later, I just felt it kind of come up through my feet, and it felt like it sounded or felt like someone had cracked a 2x4 over my head. That was the kind of noise it felt like, and I just went black for a second, and I was okay, I think, and I'm not sure, and other people in the house said that they saw the lightning jumping out of the wall sockets, but nobody got hurt to speak of, other than feeling like I got hit by a 2x4.
Yeah.
That was also in the.
Was that 2 weeks ago? Was it? We just had another. No. And last summer, we had and there are a number of houses that had these smart homes, trophy homes. Their entire infrastructure of
That's not the lightning horn, is it?
backing out,
Yeah.
3 whistles. Um, their entire smart tech systems wiped out. All their equipment, ancillary equipment, everything wiped out. Had to be totally replaced.
Because of a lightning strike.
Yeah, in the ground, outside, following wires inside. Not their,
Something to be said for old-fashioned fuse breakers.
yeah, not their, and these things, I would assume, are grounded,
You'd
but
think.
not their outlets in their regular 120 electrical system, but their other
It's probably only a
electronic,
12-volt
which is
thing.
only 12 volts
Yeah.
systems, but they're tied into their 120.
Yeah,
but
we have
totally,
that at our house.
totally wiped out, and all their landscape lighting fried.
What's $100,000?
Whatever, right?
So, are you familiar with the oldest house on Nantucket getting hit
Oh,
by
yes.
lightning?
Yes, yes.
When and where? Can you describe
I
that
heard
day?
I heard the fire engines, and
Give us a little perspective. What time of year, what day, and where were
it
you?
was the middle of the late August. It was very hot, muggy day. Middle of the afternoon, it was terribly muggy. Dew point had to be up to 69, 70. It was really hot out. And I got to the oldest house before the fire engines because I happened to be in the vicinity with them. I happened to have my cameras and everything, so I started taking pictures right away.
Oh, you saw it? You came by the house on fire?
On fire.
Did you
I
know
got
what
up
had
around the
happened?
chimney. So the fire engines got there. People were explaining. I don't know if they weren't. I don't think they were open at the time, but you can read about that in the reports. But the lightning strike hit along the side, hit the chimney, went down inside the house, following something in the chimney, whether there was some metal or whatever. But the house was totally shut up at the end of the day. I guess it was, obviously it was closed, and so it was tight. But what happened was the condensation, the humidity inside the house instantly expanded. Instantly.
Uh-huh. The heat from the lightning.
Evidently, the heat from the lightning expanded the moisture in the house, and it bulged all the walls, outside walls in the house. So it compromised the whole framework of the building in such a way that there was only 2 ways to fix it: demolish it and rebuild it, or put a steel framework hidden on the inside of the building to hold the structure up, and that's what they ended up doing.
So the house was not destroyed by fire, but by the expanding air caused by the heat of the lightning.
Correct. Exactly. So that
Did you know that it was lightning that had caused the fire when you came on the scene?
That's what people that were there. There was a house, people living in a house right beside it, right in front of it, and they had seen during the storm, saw heard a lightning strike, heard the thunder, a crack of the lightning. And I guess they said it was hit by lightning.
So
They were answering to a call at the oldest house that had been struck by lightning.
at this point, the house is not a residence; it's a museum, or what?
Correct. It's a museum, and it's owned by the Historical Association, and they maintain it.
So that house is not destroyed; it's still there.
It's still there. It was totally rebuilt, and in the course of rebuilding, they found a lot of interesting things that they didn't know about the house, because they had to take things apart and rebuild and refurbish and whatnot, and they always wondered where the coal cellar was, and they didn't want to take it apart to look for it. But at this point, they were able to do some refurbishing, and they actually did find the old coal cellar.
How old is the oldest house on Nantucket?
Well, 1685, 86. And there is no date. It's supposedly a wedding gift, but there is no record of a wedding.
From
and
who?
The only record they have is that Jethro Coffin and his wife had a baby in 1687. So they figured that was after they moved in 1685. So the date, there is a little discrepancy, there was a little discrepancy, but they figure, oh, they had the baby a year later, so let's say it's 1685 is the number, and I guess that's what we go by.
That's very interesting, because I've got this family, what do you call it when you go back in time and you see your family?
Tree, yeah.
Family tree,
yeah.
And my family tree goes back all the way to 1600s of the Starbucks and the coffins. So
what side are you on?
I'm on the Starbucks side, but
you're still a coffin.
Apparently,
you can't
we all married one another, right?
Right. There were so many coffins that everybody ended up being a coffin, no matter what.
Eventually, my great-great-grandfather's name was Allen, Shubal Allen. I don't know. I think he married one of the Starbuck ladies, one of the Mary Starbuck, but not the Mary Starbuck, one of her descendants.
Right. Well, that's exciting. Oh, you
So,
got work to do.
I'm going to have to go down that house and see
Well, we're going to take a ride this week over to the cemetery.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Sherburne.
I should have brought that with me.
They've got the Settlers Cemetery. We can go visit that. And we can go out to Tristram's Landing, and I can show you where they stepped out of the boat.
Great. I love that. So,
because I stepped out of the boat when I first came here in the 60s, early 60s.
Why did you come to Nantucket?
Fishing.
You like fish?
Fishing and exploring.
And
so I would launch a boat in Woods Hole, travel down around the Elizabeth Islands, wander over to Menemsha, go out to Nomans, fish around the backside. So if things weren't there, I'd go over to Squibnocket, right around the corner there. Then I'd wander up to Wasky Point. From Wasky Point to
Vineyard,
Muskeget.
Right?
This is in a 16-foot Boston whaler. And then from Wasky Point there, it's not very far to Muskeget Island.
You must have seen plenty of thunderstorms doing that.
Never experienced any bad weather. Is that crazy? Because I'm not going to go boating in a storm, but to this day I think back, today I wouldn't be able to do that. It seems like there's a storm every weekend or something. I wouldn't be able to go boating like that. So then I'd walk over to Muskeget, and then I'd poke around Tuckanuck, and if I needed a little more fuel, I'd go into Hither Creek, get some gas, and head back a different way. Go back around Polglite, Edgartown, and
so you know your way around. You
and
started in eastern Massachusetts in Hingham,
right.
And you've got a couple of decades of weather watching. Does it seem to you that the thunderstorms are worse on Nantucket than they might be on Cape Cod or the Vineyard or Hingham?
We don't get, here on Nantucket, there aren't that many thunderstorms. But when there are a good thunderstorm, or a thunderstorm here, it can be pretty violent, I've noticed. But when you're living on the mainland, you get thunderstorms all the time.
Yeah. So generally
the
water...
just look at the weather map every night. They're just parading all the way up the East Coast, over the land. And, from Connecticut to Maine, just pouring by in all that hot air. And not too often. And it's fairly infrequent that we get thunderstorms here.
Do you have any theories for why they are a little bit more intense once they do arrive here?
Hot air rising off the island's going to capture them, and they can just get locked in here for, a 3-hour thunderstorm is pretty scary, where normally they pass off pretty quickly and move out, within half an hour to 45 minutes, they're gone.
And you
but to have
mentioned
one last any length of time is very scary, because you never know. It's a good chance you're going to get hit, because usually they're gone by your residence within minutes. Within 15 minutes they're gone, and they're hitting somebody else.
you mentioned something about the makeup of the soil. Did you say a couple more
Well, you
words?
find parts of the island where there's more iron maybe in the clay. So areas where there's clay, there seem to be more strikes going on.
So the earth could be a little bit more conductive in those areas.
Definitely more conductive. Yeah. You can see a lot more strikes happening there. So people that build in certain areas tend to have a lot of problems with thunderstorms, just like people down south have problems with tornadoes, because they're in some valley someplace where the tornadoes just travel down, funnel down these valleys, and it's just a poor place to be living, because you're going to get whacked constantly.
Are you afraid of thunderstorms?
No, but after that incident in Sconset where that gentleman got killed, I have greater respect.
That man was in his bed inside his house.
In his bed, asleep, with his hand on his dog.
Do you remember his name?
So the story, no. But it's in the Inky Mirror. They can look it up.
That was back in the 80s also?
Maybe later in the 90s. Yeah.
So what that says to me is that lightning is capricious and it can do anything. The man was in his house in his bed and he got hit and died. And you were next to a horse outside by a door and you had lightning hit within 30 feet of you and you had no effect.
Exactly. And our house has never been hit, and we've had some strikes pretty close, but it's never been hit. I think it's because the house is built on a lot of fill that they dump there.
Sand.
Over a marsh. Road rubble.
Road rubble. How's that for conducting?
I guess pretty poor.
Good.
Because we haven't gotten hit.
Well, that's a recommendation.
And I had a big antenna on the house for a radio, and you thought maybe that would be an inductor, but no such.
You have any forecasts for hurricane season this year?
Well, I think they already made a prediction of a few more than last year. So we'll go with that. So it's interesting that some years they all end up more in the Gulf of Mexico, coming up through the Caribbean. In other years they'll come right off Africa and be a little further to the east, and then will come right up the eastern seaboard, like last year.
I've seen a lot of analogies to 1954. I've seen a lot of records broken from 54, both warm and cold records, so I'm a bit alarmed about hurricane season myself this year.
Yeah. So warmer water, more storms.
Plus, it's rather...
And it's the amount of maybe dust storms off of Africa and warm air coming off of Africa, that you get all those tropical depressions forming there.
And also a bunch of cold in central Canada coming down to the Great Lakes. It kind of creates an upper level weather pattern where you have air coming from the southeastern United States up the coast.
Right,
It'd be
exactly.
a humid, warm summer with probably a lot
so
of
you got them funneling right up the eastern seaboard.
Well, we've had a tremendous amount of rain for spring so far.
Oh, it's amazing. Amazing. So we're out of it now.
I think that's a
Thank
shot across
goodness.
the bow.
Right. We've had some interesting weather. One time we had a water spout right inside Nantucket Harbor. We were standing by the cottages down there in the corner of Washington Street and Meter, and all of a sudden it was raining seaweed. Seaweed was coming down all over the place, and it was like it happened. People were talking about a water spout, and I said, "Oh, that's what happened."
When was that?
Oh, early in the 90s, mid 90s sometime.
Raining seaweed.
Water spout. We had that seaweed raining down on us, so you never know. The weather's always interesting.
All right, totally off subject. I'm fascinated with Sinbad. Can you tell me the quick story of Sinbad?
Sinbad the Crow. Wow.
How did you get Sinbad?
Sinbad was brought to the aquarium that I had by one of the Marx boys that lived out in Pulpus Road. He brought it over and it had
A crow.
a crow, a young bird, but it had fledged and it could fly, and it had a dismembered wing. It was hanging, and he brought it, and I wrapped him up and kept him from using that wing, and it healed over a period of time, of 3 weeks to a month or so, and then he was able to fly, and he was sort of bonded to us because of all our attention. And we tried to let him go, but the other crows would have nothing. They would not allow him. He was too bonded to humans, and he wasn't talking their language, and they just chased him mercifully. And he would come roaring back to the house and fly into the garage and hang up on his favorite spot was on top of the bandsaw. So he sort of lived in the house, and he was a really interesting bird, and we learned a lot from him. And my daughter was going to school at the time, up at the what's the name? I mentioned it.
Nantucket.
But anyway.
Larry had a pet crow.
So at the school, and she would ride her bike to school. And one day I said, "Oh, where's Heather? She has to take this book with her." And oh, she's already left. And I said, "Well, where's Sinbad?" And he's flying with her. So I ran up the driveway, and there she was. She was already up the street, and there was Sinbad flying over her head, doing these little loops up and down, all the way to school, and then he would hang out on the roof and wait until she came out at recess, and then they would play in the yard, and he would pull their shoelaces, and the kids would all squeal. Then he would, and when recess was over, he'd go up on the roof and wait till the end of school, and then he'd fly back with her to the house. And he was a real character. He was always finding things around the neighborhood and bringing them home. He would find hubcaps or
Cheese crackers.
or bottle caps and whatnot, and he'd bring them home. He'd have piles of stuff on the table out front.
Thanks, dear.
Get that out.
And we'd always find lumps underneath our tablecloth in the dining room. We'd look under, what are these lumps here? And we'd lift it up, and there'd be all kinds of little things, shiny things or whatever that he'd find, and he'd shove underneath the placemats. And so that was Sinbad. And we had Sinbad for a number of years. And he was a pure joy, a real character. And then the time he would go around the neighborhood, and he visited a neighbor one time, and the neighbor was furious because he was making so much noise. She'd come out and scream at him, and she said, "Get out of here, get out of here," and she'd yell at him, and he thought that was wonderful. He thought he would talk back, and he thought he was getting all this attention. And he'd come back home, and he was right across the street, not far away, 2 houses behind each other. And one day we got a call from the police that you got to come over here and get this crow. And we went over, and what Sinbad had done is he had gone over, and the baby carriage was out there, and there was a baby in the baby carriage, and the baby was crying, and he was on the roof, and he wasn't. Baby kept crying and crying. He flew down on the handlebars of the baby carriage, and he looked and looked, and then he figured, okay, I know what's wrong, and he flew into the garden and got some tomatoes and brought them over and dropped them into the baby carriage as food because the baby was hungry. He just knew the baby was hungry and got some food for him. But she came running out screaming bloody murder, and she called the police, and we had we had to reprimand him.
It was like the day he
Put
went
it
to
all on. We both talk about that incident.
and he got called to the
in
principal's
Sinbad.
office once too,
And he
right?
got called to the principal office up at the school. Academy Hill School. Academy Hill, which is now our home. People live there year round now. It's housing. But that's Academy Hill. And Mr. Olney was the principal. And Heather called and said, I'm in Mr. Olney's office and Sinbad is here. You got to come and get him. So, and Mr. Olney wants to know if his house broken. I told him yes. By the time we got there, Sinbad, we'd been sitting up on the edge of the door frame there, had flown down, or glided down onto his desk, and pulled out all the pencils and pens out of his little pot of pencils, odds and ends, and they were scattered all over. And Mr. Olney was just staying back and didn't want to get near him. And please don't, please,
The crow.
keep Mr. Sinbad at home.
The
from
crow's
now on,
flying around
right?
the principal's office,
Yeah, he's
hopping.
hopping around,
Yeah,
and
crow
flopping
hop.
around, just enjoying it. Any kind of attention he loved. And the louder you were, the more excited he got, and he would join in, and he would carry on
So
something.
crows are pretty
He
smart.
loved. Extremely smart. Extremely smart. They can get from here to there in a straight line faster than a wink of an eye. And I have crows to this day that come to the house all the time. But that's not the only incident that I've had with birds. Take this seagull for once. I was in the garden one day with my back to the house. You know how you feel like somebody's staring at
Yeah.
you? And I turn around, I look at the house, I look up at the peak of the roof, and there's a seagull up there, black-backed gull, I
Yeah.
think.
Oh, those are intimidating.
No, not a blackback, because I'm not, that's a flying rat.
Yeah.
But this gull's up there, and he's got one of those plastic bottle wrappers wrapped around his head.
Oh.
And I'm saying, oh, geez, I turn around and I look up and I go, oh, no, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. You're up there, and I'm in the garden. I go back to weeding, and I had my baseball cap on and my peripheral forward. I don't see, and I happen to look up, and there's the gull, and he's 3 or 4 feet away from me, right in front of me, and I can see that the plastic wrap is double wrap around his neck, and there's no way he is ever going to get that off. It's right down on his neck, and it's tight. I just talked to him. I said, you're in deep trouble, and I know you gotta let me take that off. And he walked right over. I pulled out a knife. I always have a knife, a jackknife, anything. So I'll tell you, that saved my life one time. That's another story. I took out the knife. He came right over. I grabbed the plastic, and I had to, it's not easy to cut the plastic. You have to put a little pressure on it. And I jiggled it and cut the plastic in 2 different places and took it off. And I got some food because he was a little shaky on his feet. And I fed him some stuff. And he hung around for a few hours, and then he left. But he would come back for another 2 weeks or so. I'd see him on the roof, I'd see him in the yard every once in a while, and then he sort of disappeared, and that was sort of it. But then, about, I don't know if it's possible, this is real freaky, but about maybe 8 years later, we're having a picnic in the yard, a cookout in the yard with some friends that have come from England. And we're poking around. I said, let's get this done, and we're moving this and we're moving that. And he says, "What's this?" And I look down, and there's a seagull running around in our feet. I mean, seagulls I see once in a while, but they don't come near you. But this seagull is right at our feet, just poking around, running around, looking for stuff. There's no food out. We were sort of arranging stuff. I have to believe it's that seagull comes once in a while and says thank you.
That's an amazing
Kind of
story.
crazy.
You got away with nature.
But this story even gets stranger. I don't know if you've got time, but it's called Little Bird. And this story is, to me, it's pretty amazing. The gull one is,
It gets better. What's the little bird story?
little bird's a little duck. One day I'm upstairs in the house, and I hear a ruckus going on in the pond right next to me. There's a pond there. It's 60 by 40 or so, and I can always hear the ducks in the pond over there. But I hear a ruckus going on, and a few minutes later, the ruckus was a little louder, and I knew exactly what was going on. And I run down the stairs, smash open the fly out the front door, down the steps. I run across the yard. I bound in a single leap over a split rail fence, and I run into the pond. I still got my, summer clothes on. I run into the water, shoes, everything. I know exactly what's going on. And there's the little duck. He's kind of smaller than all the other mallards that are in there. And they're all gathered around little duck. And the little duck is just trying to get to shore, and he's flapping like crazy, and all the other ducks are all around him, probably 30 ducks, and they're all screeching bloody murder, quack, 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 quack. They're going nuts, and I know exactly what's going on. Duck is here flapping like crazy. The head of this turtle is right there, attached to his leg.
Oh.
I know exactly, because I've done this before, where the tail is. I grab the tail, pull him up out of this mucky water. This turtle is about 25 pounds. That's a big turtle. And the only way you can get a snapping turtle to let go of something, I mean, you can beat them over the head with a sledgehammer and they won't let go if they've got something. But if you pick them up off the tail, by the tail, they'll let go. And immediately lets go of the little duck. And the little duck rushes to shore. I take the turtle and put him in a barrel and come back, and all the ducks are huddled around little duck. You're saved, you're saved, you're saved. Because he could have sucked them under. But it's amazing that little duck had made it that far. He'd gone quite a ways. I don't know how he did it. And all the trauma that went on with what was going on, okay? So, I see him limping, so I know his leg, but he can stand on it, so he's okay. Otherwise, I gotta try and get him and then let him go, because he may not survive. Feral cats will get him. So he looks okay, and then 3 or 4 days later, a couple people came over to visit, and I said, "Oh, you got to see this little bird here. I'll tell you what happened." And I go out in the yard there, and I look down at the pond, and it's like 40 feet away there. And I see that little duck over there. He's kind of limping, and they nod, And while I'm pointing, little duck flies right over, comes right over in the yard, right over me, and I still got my finger up. I'd been pointing, and I'm pointing. I didn't know what to do, and all of a sudden he starts to helicopter down. I don't know what the heck am I, and I hold my hands out, and he lands in my hand.
Oh my goodness!
Lands in my hand.
Oh, Papa!
I put him down on the ground, and I went and got some bread and stuff, and fed him and whatnot. He sort of wandered around and whatnot, and then his leg was a little better, and then he went back to the pond, I said, "Gee, that was really something. That was crazy, and then about maybe a month later or so, A good month or later, there was 8 people came over to the house to visit. There were a garden group or something. They wanted to see the lotus in the pond, and so there were 8. And I told them the story. I said, look it. I was pointing my finger out there, and this duck flew over, and guess what? He did it again. He flew over, and he did the exact same thing. He fluttered, helicoptered down right into my hand, and I put him on the ground. The good thing is, I now had 8 witnesses, because who the heck was going to believe a
Can we
story
believe
like
these
that?
stories? Larry, it's been a pleasure. Amazing. Thank you for visiting.
It's all good. Nature is beautiful.
We could listen all night. We've only got about 1,800 gigabytes here.
It's real exciting to talk to you, Tim.
It's an honor to meet you, Larry.
I think we've got a lot of interesting experiences.
This could be the
to share.
beginning. Yes.
Yeah.
Story hour with Larry.
It's coming. And there's more to come.
Nice to meet you.
It's been a pleasure.